evangelistic evangelistic group for the church planting, right? So that's what we've been developing, evangelistic small group, different areas. We wanted to have small groups, maybe 2 or 4 people can attend, 2 or maybe even 1 person with us, one another church members, right? Small groups where we study gospel together is one of the best way to develop churches, right? So that's what we've been talking about. Now, this all what we are going to discuss today are simple, but for the sake of discussion, I'm just going through it. It's not that you may not know because you've been to this kind of groups or you've been doing it, but it's good to go through before, in this class. Ask a good question is the key to successful evangelistic small groups. Good question. Ask good questions, right? So any new group begins, there will be first meeting will make or break any possibility for future gathering. So you wanted to be very careful. You want to be very careful that how you begin the first meeting, right? Always understand evangelistic small group is not a preaching service, right? Don't do that. You don't sit there and preach. You talk casual talk, right? Should be held in a location familiar to the guest, right? It can be in home or some other place, right? Wherever you want. Maybe in a coffee shop, or maybe in a maybe in a restaurant. Anywhere you can have. Not necessary to have in your own home or in somebody's home. Welcome each guest as they arrived and thank them for coming, right? And you make whatever the way people can sit, right? And provide snacks or whatever you wanted to provide, coffee with the snacks, whatever you can, right? It's where people can sit and maybe have something to eat. Use question to set people at ease to stimulate discussion, right? Maybe you can begin by asking small question, usually in the beginning, introduction. Let's introduce ourselves, right? Introduce every guest that is coming. You don't have too many people because this is a small group, right? Jesus was the world's greatest teacher, and he often used questions to engage and draw out his audience. I have given the references. The way that Jesus developed or dealt with this kind of groups is by asking questions. Asking questions. So, you ask questions, right? Never inform when you can inquire, right? So inquiring is what we are looking at, asking questions. Ask open-ended questions that cannot be answered with a yes or no, right? Usually that may be way that some people ask, is Jesus man or God? Then somebody, maybe that is easy. But what do you think about Jesus? That is an open-ended question. What do you think about Jesus? Is an open-ended question. What do you think about Christianity? What do you think about Christians? Those are open-ended questions. Ask different kinds of questions to draw people out, right? And then there is something called, this is something we do that all the time, icebreaker question. What are the icebreaker questions, right? That is like introducing what is your name, what are you from, how many children you have, what do they do, what do you do, what is your sports team, do you involve in any of those things, what is your favorite food, right? So, right, icebreaker, number 1. Number 2, observation. Questions help people to identify what they see and hear, right? So there are who, what, where, when questions that draw out facts on a particular truth. So what do? Once you finish the ice breaking, once you finish, you maybe share a story, right? Share a story from the gospel. And you ask them to observe, right? Observe. For example, who is the main character in the story? Where was Jesus when he told the parable? When did the main event occur? What events transpired in the parable? So these are all observational questions to be asked, right? Ask the observational questions. Because this is an unbeliever. He is listening to a story in the Bible, and we want him to answer. Then, interpretation. That is, questions draw out the meaning behind the observation. Well, in the observation, they see what is happening. But in interpretation, what are we asking? What does that mean? Right? What does that mean, or how this is significant? We can ask the question, what do you think he meant by that? Jesus said, I am the bread that came from heaven. What do you think about that statement? This is what Jesus said. I am the bread that came from heaven. And what conclusions can you draw from this, right? So we interpret, we explain the meaning and significance. And then, number 4, reflection questions. 6, to draw out how people really feel about the topic. Okay, how do you feel about the idea that God would forgive a man like a publican? What do you, because 2 people went to pray, it's a story. Yeah, we talked about it. So how do you feel about the idea that God would forgive a man like a publican and reject the Pharisees who said, I am good, excellent? What do you feel about? How do you respond to the biblical claim that sin in your life is so offensive to God and spiritually separates you from Him? How do you respond to that? Those are the reflection questions. Reflection questions. So in a small group, right, there is a way you can go about in discussion, asking questions, right? Small groups, better way. Don't do a preaching, but ask questions. Number 5, application questions. That is challenging people to take the next step, right? For example, now, basically application is asking, now what? Now what? What, if anything, will you change in your life as a result of today's discussion? What do you think planning to change? Or based on what you have said, just read, what changes do you need to make in your life? Or how will you deal with the sin problem that Bible claims all of us have, right? We focus specifically to life of a person. So these are all ask different kinds of questions to draw people out, right? So the idea is that use questions, right? You ask questions to stimulate people to discussion. Number 5, about halfway through your time together, use a transitional question to move the conversation to spiritual matters. Spiritual matters. That is, you ask certain questions, halfway is done. In the middle of the discussion, try to go ask a transitional question. Right? You can say something like this. You all recall the purpose of our meeting is to explore various issues relating to spiritual journey. Let's make that transition now by having several of you describe for us what your truth source is upon which you base your spiritual belief, right?
Wow.
So now you said let's now talk about what is the truth source. What is that makes a spiritual statement, right? What is this that makes that spiritual statement valid or true? You say, yes, all are sinners, none righteous, not even one. So this is a statement from the Bible. Question is, why that statement is true? What makes it true, right? Or then you can go ahead and say, okay, if you could meet with God one-on-one, ask him any question you wanted to, and you knew he would answer, what would you ask? Right? So you can go ahead again and ask them, okay. For example, the question that we asked again, why do you think that the statement that Bible says is true? The answer for that one actually is because Bible is God's word. Bible is God's word, right? But now, again, we are asking one more question. Okay, now you imagine that you got an opportunity to meet God directly. What would you ask him? Right? What would you ask him if you met now? Their answers will often tell you where they are in their spiritual journey and issues that they are wrestling with. So their answers will tell you something. Don't try to answer the question now, but record each of the questions as they are given. So they will give you their answers. You can record it, you can write it down and answer them back. Once the group is done giving their responses, ask them why their particular questions came to mind. Why that? Okay, that if I meet God now, I'm going to ask the question, why God? Why there is suffering in the world? Why I am like this? Some people are going to ask that kind of question. So you write it down, then you can answer them. You are seeking to create enough interest so that they will want to return and seek out answers for themselves in the future meeting. You're not going to, maybe may not give them answer right then and there, sometime in the future. Right? So allow about 20-30 minutes for this transition into spiritual matters, but keep your overall time schedule in mind. Maybe a 30 minutes of discussion on the topic that is given in our hand, a 30 minutes of discussion, 20 to 30 minutes of discussion for spiritual problems and matters in an evangelistic meeting. All right, so that's number 5. Finally, number 6. What do? You discussed this with this new group. Invite the people to come again next week to see how God would answer their questions. Everyone they asked God their questions. Now you prepare the answers, biblical answers. How would God answer their question? Some people are coming back, some people may not come. And encourage them to bring the Bible if they can, because that's where God will answer their question, right? Remember, we end the meeting on time. Leave people hungry for more rather than prolonging the meeting. There's no point in having a long meeting, but end the meeting where people want to learn more. During that week, you would be studying scriptures to answer them. Now remember, this is not to make traditional teaching session. Time for people to explore the Bible and find answers for themselves in response to your questions, right? So that's what we want to do. So this is a kind of evangelistic small group. And how do you lead evangelistic small group? All right. So that is what about in church planting evangelistic small group. Now we need to talk about follow-up and discipleship ministries. We will deal with that tomorrow.